welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels, and folks, today we are again, going through the FDA Executive Summary for April 24th, 2014. Yesterday, we stopped on page 17, right before we got into the individual patient variability. So we're going to go ahead and go on from there. Okay. I apologize ahead of time if I kind of follow up on some of these more technical terms that you're going to see throughout this summary. Individual patient variability. Individual body chemistry and other factors can have a significant impact on how electric current affects an individual. Some people are highly sensitive to current, experiencing involuntary muscle contraction with shocks from static electricity. Others can draw large sparks from discharging static electricity and hardly perceive it, much less experience a muscle spasm. As stated previously, it has been demonstrated in normal subjects that there is a large range of intersubject variability with respect to perception of equally applied shocks. Arntz and DeJongand, 1993, Lewenthal, 2001, Butterfield, 197, DiLetto et al., 1992, Duker et al., 1990, Jones et al., 1982, and Roman and Harris, 1987. Lewenthal et al., 2001, did a study in which they provided shocks to the biceps of 29 undergraduate students. The mean perceptual threshold, the level at which the stimulus was perceived, was 17.9 volts, with a range between 6 and 52 volts. Likewise, the mean pain threshold, the level at which the stimulus was described as painful, was 120.9 volts, with a range between 48 and 200 volts. Additionally, they noted that for two subjects, the maximum study output of 200 volts was not enough to elicit pain. Butterfield, 1975, conducted a study in which 60 Hz shock was provided to the forearm of 10 normal subjects. The mean uncontrollable threshold was 5.3 mA, with a range between 1.6 and 10 mA. The mean pain threshold was 7.6 mA, with a range between 3.9 and 11.6 mA. The mean tolerance level above which the subject could not tolerate the stimulus was 9.4 mA, with a range of 5.1 mA to 14.1 mA. Roman and Harris, 1987, provided shocks to forearms of 40 undergraduate students. The range of the perceptual thresholds was between 0.15 and 1.43 mA. The range of the pain thresholds was between 0.45 and 2.4 mA, and the range of tolerance was between 1.35 to 7.35 mA. In addition to showing intersubject variability between subjects, these studies also demonstrate the difficulties in comparing the device outputs used to elicit pain between devices, because the articles lack many of the necessary device characteristics discussed above, which we've already gone over, needed to make such comparisons. For example, the pain threshold in Butterfield 1975 study was between 3.9 and 11.6 mA, while it was between 0.45 and 2.4 mA in the Roman and Harris 1987 study. The difference may be due to differences in other device characteristics such as electrode sizes, current densities, electrode locations, and other device output parameters, pulse width and frequency, and individual subject differences. So in layman's terms, they had a bunch of undergraduate students from various time periods try out different levels of shocks in order to get an idea of a pain threshold. Moving forward, other factors that affect stimulation perception. Although there is little data available regarding the individual patient characteristics that can affect pain caused by electrical shocks, a cursory view of the literature shows that anxiety, attention, behavioral characteristics, and personality types may all be factors contributing to individual differences in shock perception. Anxiety and attention. The influence of anxiety on human experience of pain and other responses is still largely unclear, and the nature of the hypothesized mechanism varies widely in that some formulations imply that anxiety increases pain, while others imply that anxiety decreases pain. Arntz and DeJong, 1993, reviewed 10 literature studies that have looked at the effects of experimentally induced anxiety on pain, not necessarily painful shock. 3 studies showed that painful sensitivity increased with anxiety. 3 studies showed there was no clear effects. 4 studies showed that pain decreases with anxiety. In a study of 24 spider phobics who received shocks under various levels of anxiety, Arntz and DeJong, 1993, demonstrated that pain was rated lower when the subject's attention was diverted away compared to the subject attended to the pain stimulus, regardless of level of anxiety. Thus, they concluded that their attentional focus rather than anxiety per se seems to influence pain. They hypothesized that the widely varying influences of anxiety on pain as observed in previous experiments and clinical observations can be explained by considering attentional factors, but that it is conceivable that anxiety should surpass a threshold before it influences pain. Therefore, they state that the dose effects investigations, which document the effects of different levels of anxiety on different levels of pain, are needed. DeLito et al. 1992 found in a study of 30 normal subjects that whether the subject paid attention to the stimuli intensity versus the unpleasantness affected how they perceived the pain associated with the stimuli. In a study of 60 normal subjects with shocks applied to the forearm, Duker et al. 1999 found no differences between focusing attention and distraction. However, they note that they have used a high current output 40 mA in their study, and this may have affected results in comparison to studies using much lower outputs. So basically, they're going over several studies that have studied the power that anxiety and attention to what is being done to you has in regards to perception of pain. And right now, from everything I see here, it still looks like the work on that is still inconclusive. Behavior characteristics and personality traits. As stated previously, the subject impressions induced by electrical stimulation can cause cuteness, sensation of intensity, e.g. touch, prick, itch, or sharp pains, as well as the emotional feeling of discomfort or unpleasantness, DeLito 1992 and Toshiro and Hagishima 1981. In a study of 30 normal subjects exposed to neuromuscular electrical stimulation to the quadriceps formis muscles, DeLito et al. 1992 found that deferred copying styles, monitors versus blunters, affected how subjects characterized the discomfort associated with stimuli, whether the subject primarily judged the intensity or the unpleasantness. Blunters found the applied electrical stimuli to be predominantly intense, whereas monitors found the same stimuli to be predominantly unpleasant. Duker and his colleagues, 1999, found that the personality factors introversion-extroversion accounted for statistically significant differences in pain sensation ratings of clinical electric shocks, extroverts producing lower levels of pain. So, basically they're saying extroverts, for whatever reason, seem to have lower pain levels, as opposed to introverts who would probably be focusing on it more. Conclusions. A primary variable for determining the perception of electric shock is electric current that passes through the body, which depends on the voltage and the resistance of the path the current follows through 2 points in the body. Other variables that also affect perception of electric shock are pulse duration, shock duration, output frequency, waveform, electrodes, size, location, design, and material, the number of frequency of the shocks delivered, and intersubject variability. However, this important device descriptive information is often lacking in publications on electric shock devices, Butterfield 1975, which makes it difficult to compare the effects of pain perception of EDS across devices. Clinical background information regarding SIB and aggressive behavior. This section discusses clinical background on SIB and aggressive behavior and associated treatment approaches. Individuals with autism spectrum disorders, intellectual impairment, and various developmental disabilities may pose a number of behavioral challenges to siblings, parents, teachers, various therapists, e.g., occupational, physical, and their peers. Most notable is the relatively high prevalence of self-injurious behavior, SIB, that is characteristics of patients with these disorders. However, aggressive behavior is a common comorbid behavior in individuals with SIB, particularly those individuals with limited intellectual ability and or various developmental disabilities, including but not limited to, I'm going to say the other word instead of what they put in here, intellectual disability, and autism spectrum disorders. The majority of published studies on SIB typically include aggression as part of the description of the clinical spectrum or as an inclusion study in a clinical study. SIB and aggressive behavior in persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are two major categories of destructive behavior: self-injurious behavior and aggression towards others or toward property. The most common forms of SIB include head banging. I did that as a child. Remember, I used to bang my head into the floor. Hand biting, excessive scratching and picking of skin. The most extreme cases involve persons with serious SIB, which is estimated to be greater than 25,000 individuals in the United States. Ross, Collins, and Cornish, 2002. These behaviors involve repeated self-inflicted non-accidental injuries, producing bleeding, protruding, and broken bones, and other permanent tissue damage, eye gouging or poking leading to blindness, swallowing dangerous substances or physical objects, also known as pica or pica. SIB is especially perplexing because to observers the repeated self-infliction of pain appears quite maladaptive and incomprehensible. Patients with SIB frequently demonstrate aggressive behavior, which encompasses a wide range of behaviors and is generally defined as conduct that, due to its intensity and or frequency, presents as an imminent danger to the person who exhibits behavior, to other people, or to property. In my case, it was property. Like the walls, my door, my poor mom's ottoman. Accordingly, intervention is necessary for the safety of the individual engaging into the destructive behavior, for those who against the aggression is directed, for the protection of property. I didn't grow out of it so much as, I don't know, I still do it when I'm in meltdown. It's just since I've been little, the chances for me to go in the meltdown have become less and less as I have a better perception of the world around me. But yeah, let's go forward here. Less serious for the individual, but potentially more dangerous for caregivers and family, are destructive behaviors involving repeated physical assaults that injure others. The treatment of all types of destructive behavior is difficult. In the context of concerns regarding personal freedom and dignity, many specific therapies have employed unusual, unique, and controversial approaches. Methods that employed physical or social restriction, aversive procedures, and psychotropic drugs are controversial largely because of the evidence of safety and effectiveness has not been rigorously studied. Relatively few studies investigating treatments for SIB and aggressive behavior are rigorous, controlled clinical trials, and the majority of the treatment studies typically involve single case reports and or very small sample sizes. The methodical limitations of most studies contribute to the lack of data on the safety and effectiveness for treatments for SIB and aggressive behavior. Again, if you remember, all this behavior is always triggered by something. Even with me, where I am on the spectrum, there's always a triggering mechanism that will put me in that state. Like I said, as I've gotten older, it doesn't happen as often. The few very rare occurrences where it does, it's always triggered by something. So find out what that something is. More often than not, the behavior will cease. Not always, but a good majority of the time. Okay, moving forward. A number of conditions, disabilities are associated with SIB, aggressive behavior, and they include autism spectrum disorders, Cornelia de Lange syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, hereditary sensory neuropathy, Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, Rett syndrome, severe and profound intellectual disabilities, Tourette syndrome, and visual impairment. SIB and aggressive behavior are major problems in persons with developmental disabilities. According to Public Law 100-146, 10-1-1987, the term developmental disability is defined as a severe chronic disability of a person which is attributable to a mental or physical impairment or combination of mental and physical impairments, is manifested before the person attains the age of 22, is likely to continue indefinitely, results in substantial functional limitations in 3 or more of the following areas of major life activity. Self-care, that was major when I was younger. I had real issues there. Extremely bad hygiene as a young teenager. Receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction. I had issues with that when younger. Capacity for independent living, economic self-sufficiency. That's always been an issue. I've definitely got better since I've got older, but yeah, it's an ableist world out there. What can I say? Reflects the person's need for a combination and sequence of special, interdisciplinary, or generic care, treatment, or other services which are of lifelong or extended duration and are individually planned and coordinated. SIB in persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities are considered to be distinct from the recently proposed non-suicidal self-injury in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition. So that DSM-5 that I'm always bringing up to you, this is what it is. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition. As these behaviors are better explained by autism spectrum disorder and or intellectual disability. Estimates of prevalence of SIB in individuals with intellectual impairment and developmental disabilities range from 2.6% to 40%, Griffin et al. 1987. More recently, McLean et al. 2010 found a prevalence of SIB of 32% in a clinic sample of children with developmental disabilities. SIB is one of the most striking and devastating conditions associated with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Cooper et al. 2009. Beyond the obvious physical injury, self-injurious behavior can be very distressing for patients and caregivers. Hastings 2002. Severely limit a person's participation in community activities and lead to placement in a more restrictive living situation. Emerson 2001. Once manifest, SIB is likely to continue over the lifespan, is restraint to treatment, and is costly. Emerson et al. 2001. For adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, considerable effort has been directed to determining risk factors for SIB and aggressive behavior. A meta-analysis study group found that individuals with severe, profound intellectual and developmental disabilities, a diagnosis of autism, and deficits in receptive and expressive communication are more likely to show self-injurious behavior. Remember when I told you it came from frustration? because the way we communicate a lot of times is through behavior. I've said it again. I'll say it 1,000 times. I'll say it again. Behavior is communication. Behavior is communication. Behavior is communication. Okay, moving forward. Similarly, visual impairment, impaired hearing, impaired mobility, and the presence of seizures have also been associated with self-injurious behavior. Now, this I've seen personally. I knew someone with an autism diagnosis who had a comorbid condition of having constant seizures. He would go into a day once a month where he would go into 15 grand mal seizures back to back. About longest time between each seizure would be about 5 minutes. And after he would come out of that the next day, he would be extremely violent and volatile. Just wanted to add that in there. So I definitely think that does factor in big time. Although gender was not a risk factor in meta-analysis, female gender was identified as a significant risk factor in one study, Deb et al. 2001. Adults with self-injurious behavior are more likely to exhibit other challenging behaviors, such as physical aggression, property damage, again, that was me, especially younger, and stereotyped behavior. You leave my stereotyped behavior alone. That's what keeps me calm. That keeps you away from property damage. Just saying. You leave my routines alone. Studies of self-injurious behavior in older children and adolescents suggest that those with severe, profound intellectual and developmental disabilities are more likely to exhibit self-injurious behavior. Ondo and Ushimura, 1978, Chadwick et al. 2000, and Hyman et al. 1990. Lower daily living skills, impaired ambulation, visual sensory impairment, autism, and particular gene causes, Deb 1998, have been associated with self-injurious behavior. Okay, we're going to stop here because we covered quite a bit in those few pages. First off, just to kind of recap, we did talk about how either one's emotional state, whether there's anxiety or not, and whether someone is focused on that, on what's happening, how that affects someone's perception of pain. We spoke about how somebody's personality type might be something that influences a person's concept of pain. We also gone over a little bit in regards to those who are likely to be those who do go in for self-injurious behavior just a moment ago. They do mention that it is more likely depending on the severity. People in the disability community, we don't like functioning labels because from day to day, the level of functioning can be vastly different. Particularly those of us who are like me, I'll give you an example, who appear very high functioning, that if you did not know me and were not a part of my day-to-day life, you would have no idea that I am autistic at all. I am gifted with being and privileged with my ability to be able to communicate with others. However, when I go into what we call as autism burnout, which is autism burnout is basically a regression like I did many years ago when I was about 16 years old. My functionality ability went down big time. I essentially I had to almost entirely re-potty train myself, is how badly I regressed in about around that age due to autism burnout. I had to basically re-potty train myself and re-get myself back up to where I was before suffering burnout. So you see, functionality can fluctuate. All right, so glad I covered that. Now, before we head out of here, and yes, I was watching Keeley the other day, I do want to do a little bit more digging. I can't promise I won't rant. I will try not to rant. I will actually walk away for a minute to hopefully let you watch the video in peace. But we are going to finish this out with one of the videos today. Okay, so we've mainly been hearing from parents who support the center. But the JRC doesn't just have parents who have drunk the Kool-Aid. Some of these are students in the actual school that they've had to do testimonies for the school. So this is going to be Felix. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up for you.
Live streaming can be tricky, and sometimes trying to find the right software to make your streams look really professional.
Before JRC, I wasn't going to school. I stopped going to school because I kept getting left back.
Okay, I'm going to go back.
I didn't.
Give me just a minute.
Before JRC,
I'll leave you to go ahead and watch this.
I stopped going to school because I kept getting left back. And then I didn't feel like I had to go anymore because I kept getting left back and I already knew everything they was teaching me. So now I just stopped going. That's about it. I wouldn't listen to anybody. Just do whatever I wanted to do. I just wouldn't go to class. I'd walk around the hallways all day, do nothing. When I first came to JRC, it was difficult to adjust it because I was used to doing whatever I wanted. And they had a whole bunch of rules that I had to follow. And it was complicating, but then I had to adjust to it because I was going to be here for a while. I'm in the 12th grade now. And when I first came, I was in the 7th. So I went a long way in a little bit of time. Past most of my regions, I'm just missing one. In JRC, they do testing, and it shows what you know and what you don't know. So they give you whatever you need help with. In regular school, they'll just give you what that grade is. So if you know it, you know it. There's nothing. They're not giving you anything you don't know, so it makes no sense. Well, it has helped me control myself, one, and it helped me make better decisions for myself. I'm the captain of the basketball team, and it's fun playing with them. Sometimes we argue, but it's nothing big. It's fun. Yeah. After JRC, I plan on going to college. Not sure what college. I want to stay in Massachusetts and go to college, but I'm not sure what college yet. I plan on going to a university and studying for electrical engineering.
All right, folks. Look at that. Finally managed not to rant for once. Aren't you proud of me? Alright, I'll let you make your own conclusions. You can definitely leave a comment what you think about that video in the comment section. Now, folks, this is all we got for this afternoon. Now, I will be covering more in regards to the JD versus AH. But tonight, just here in a little bit, I will be going on Rob Rules' panel, as always, on Wednesdays. Please join us there. It's going to be 5:30 Central Standard Time, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. I believe it's going to be 11:30 UK time. Now, folks, we don't get that many views on this channel. The few views that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time today. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.